Hello, I'm Malcolm Clark. I'm here to tell you a bit about A-level geography and hopefully interest you in what I think and we think in the department is really important topic. So, key messages about this are, geography is obviously topical and relevant to the world in which you're going to, and I'll talk about, job opportunities in the latter parts or reasons for looking at it. One of the key messages I'm going to look at is fieldwork. So, what we do early on in the course, in the first 2 weeks normally in a normal year, hopefully things will settle down by the time you guys want to do A-levels at Saltash. And we take the students up to Dorset, look at the Jurassic Coast, and we look at coastal evolution, how landscapes change over time. We visit Chesil Beach, which is a huge, what we call a tombolo, a huge shingle beach that stretches some 20 miles along the Dorset coast, close to Devon to the Isle of Portland. And we examine coastal sea defences and approaches to management of coastlines and how much interference human activity should have with them. Now, one of the things I think is really important about geography is just this sense of awe and wonder. Now, landscapes that we see in Devon and Cornwall are pretty special, and they're also pretty special in Dorset. And this is a view down Chesil Beach. But one of the things that always interest me is when you explore the storm waves that approached this coastline back in 2013 or 14, they were breaching. They were going over the top of the beach, and you can see people there's a scale. The beach is huge, and you have all these sort of terraces along the beach environment. But there was a lot of erosion of the beach, and they're quite concerned about what might happen to this as sea levels continue to rise through global. We visit Long's Cove and Stair Hole, which are very famous. Most people will probably visit them in their lifetime, but we take you along. And in the foreground, you can see Stair Hole, and in the background, you can see parts of Long's Cove. And we explore the relationship of rock type and the hardness of rock, and how the differences in the hardness of rock affect the rates of erosion on coastlines. And this photograph shows you a little bit more. So essentially, the landforms that you see in Stair Hole are what Long's Cove would have looked like perhaps 100,000 years ago or 60,000. We visit classic landscapes such as the Natural Arch at Durdle Door. This was famous during lockdown, in the first lockdown, and as they relaxed the rules of the lockdown, the beach was completely inundated, and unfortunately a couple of people were killed on jumping from cliffs in front of you. But we're there to look at the erosion of landforms. Old Harry and Old Harry's wife at the Foreland at Barndown in eastern Dorset extend out towards the Needles on the Isle of Wight. Classic landscapes, we look at how the rock type, in this case chalk, would have affected the rates of erosion and the types of landscapes that we've observed there. Now, the curriculum is, I don't need to read it to you, but staffing-wise, traditionally there have been 3 teachers that cover the A-level curriculum, and myself, Mr. Brooks, and Mr. Lucy would typically be the combination. There's been some variation in that this year, but typically that would be the sort of combination that we'd have. You can see the sorts of areas that we look at. Obviously, I start with coasts, and then I move on to look at water and carbon cycles, which links to biology A-level and chemistry A-level to a degree. Mr. Brooks looks at contemporary urban environments and changing places, which is about identity. And we can explore things like Cornishness and the identity of people's communities within towns and cities, as well as more commonly things such as regeneration, deprivation. Mr. Luty looks at hazards in terms of tectonics and natural hazards and climatic hazards and weather hazards, so that extends over 2 years. And then you'll notice that in the end of year 12 and into year 13, we have to do what we call the NEA, the non-examined assessment, which is based on fieldwork that you would have done, or you will do as part of the course, and typically start in the summer term. But in preparation for that, you'll notice there is a residential experience, which is fieldwork, and that is designed, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that is designed to support the students for you guys as you go into doing independent fieldwork. So as part of that fieldwork, I think the experience is better if we do it as a residential one, and my background is in outdoor education and mountain leadership and things. And so I've used different centres. This one is, in fact, one in the South Highlands in Devon. near Kingsbridge, but it serves us well, and the purpose of it is shown on the slide, zooming in through there. But it's to support the non-exam assessment. One of the most important things, I think, we have a diet of education obviously in the school environment, but the reasons to go out of the school environment is it contrasts hopefully positively with the experiences you have and supports those experiences you have in school. So the reason for the residential is to get that sense of community so that we can eat together, which we do, and then in the evenings, obviously on the slide, work together. And so we would normally do food work for the day. We'll come back to the centre. We'd get you guys cleaned up and washed and healthy and ready to eat. We'll feed you. And then in the evening, we will ask you to write up the work that we've done during the day. And most students are really positive about it and genuine. So we've never had a problem with students not being prepared and wanting to do that and enjoy the experience. And it's much more similar to a university type experience that you would have doing the residential. So we also visit Slapton Bar. Slapton Bar, some of you will know from GCSE. It's the sands in which the D-Day landings were practiced in 1943 and then into 1944. So historically it's relevant, but from a geographical perspective it's also critically important. Again, changing sea levels, rising sea levels, impact on landscape. What should we do about landscapes that are under pressure from rising sea levels? There's the Tor Cross in the foreground. On the left, you've got the Slapton Lea, which is a freshwater or brackish water lake held behind the sands that are on the coastal side, and then the Atlantic Ocean, the English Channel on the right. Tor Cross, the village itself, has been battered and bruised by storms, and this photograph was taken a few years ago now. And actually, if you visit the beach today, you'll notice there's been quite a lot of scouring out of some of the sediment below the seawall there. And we visited this site where windows have been smashed by stones being thrown by storm waves. This is Hall Sands. Hall Sands is a good example of mismanagement of coastal environments. Basically, the story behind this is that to build the Plymouth breakwater, they needed shingle, and in order to gather that shingle, there was plenty of shingle off the Hall Sands coastline in South Devon, and so they dredged the seabed and they excavated, quarried some of the shingle from the beaches. But the impact of that was that it meant that the storm waves arrived with more energy and more power because the coastline was deeper and it washed the village into the sea. So it was a very bad example of managing the coastline effectively. This is Start Point. So one of the things for me is just about the wow factor and just wanting to visit beautiful landscapes and understand something about the geomorphology, the history, the landform evolution of these places. And there is lots of interesting stuff on this coastline, things like relic cliffs, raised beaches that are now high above the present sea level, which would once have represented the sea level, but it's to do with what we call isostatic change, how the way in which the landscape has moved relative to the sea can actually be an uplift. You'll do a little bit of walking and nothing too dramatic, but we will ask you to walk some of the coastal landscapes and some of the moorland landscapes. And then we visit Dawlish Warren, which is a spit, and the spit is globally important, but it's certainly nationally important nature reserve, but globally important in terms of some of the species. They're unique to this landscape. It's at the mouth of the River Exe, and you can see in the image some of those characters. The most expensive train line in the British Isles is found along between Dawlish and Newton Abbot, between Newton Abbot and Exeter, and it's because it keeps getting smashed to bits by the waves. And again, we have this dilemma in the southwest. What should we do? Should we let that seawall break and breach and the rail line be washed into the sea, or should we continue to protect this at all costs? And that's one of the debate points that we'll have. Okay, sea defences. Familiar to GCSE, we look at and explore different types of management strategies. So in the foreground here, obviously you've got rock armour or riprap, it's called. We explore again whether it's worth protecting Dawlish Warren. In fact, we discussed that in quite a lot of detail as part of the residential. These are some other types of sea defences, something from the 60s. With concrete slabs placed in slightly more sheltered areas. Sometimes called revetment. Then we've got groins, which extend perpendicular to the coastline and trap sediment, trap it from moving sideways along the length of the coastline. And these groins need repairing, so we look at the costs and benefits of those sorts of experiences. And those of you wanting to go into sort of more vocational pathways might find geography as a useful tool to that, because jobs of the future will be about coastal management and sea defences and flood management and environmental loss, and there's lots of information linked to that. These are stone cages that make up the dune fronts in Dawlish, and in fact, if I showed you a photograph, which I don't have here, of it today, they've ripped these cages out, and they are in fact letting Dawlish, let nature take its course. It's a nature reserve, I've mentioned, and those of you who are thinking of doing biology, geography lends itself and links very naturally into some of the biology curriculum. So we do transects through the dune systems, and we look at species diversity. And if you're fans of Nature Watch and Chris Packham, and you get a sense of biodiversity and the importance of biodiversity in ecological management. And so not only are we looking at sea defences and coastal management, we're looking at the biodiversity and the habitat creation and habitat loss. These dunes would be what we call an embryo dune, which is the first part of a dune success. The students doing their fieldwork. Excellent in the background. And then we come to the upstream side of Dawlish Warren, and you notice that there is much more vegetation, it's much more sheltered, it's much more pleasant environment for plants and animals to live in. And again, one of these conservation issues is highlighted by that. Students hopefully having a good time, and my experience of this is I've been doing this for 30 odd years and of residential, 33 years of residential work, and kids enjoy it, and I think they really value that time with staff and their kids. Now we also have run, not every year, in the last couple of years we haven't been able to run, but I would hope that we'd still be in a position to offer this London trip. We take you to Bristol en route and then up to London to look at regeneration, and we look at the impact on the city itself. And so this is Bristol. This is the model of how the Bristol docks have been turned over to more leisure and recreation facilities. And then we go to London and explore Canary Wharf, and this square kilometre of land that essentially was created in the 1980s by Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, who took a gamble and said, look, I want to make Britain a financial powerhouse and offer services in banking and insurance and global trading and stock markets and stock exchanges. And she did it quite controversially by effectively booting out the docking communities in this landscape. And we go and explore the impact of that on this part of London. This is just another view across one of the docks up to Canary Wharf and the way the urban regeneration has occurred. And the cranes, in fact, that you see are not actually active, they are part of the historical landscape that they managed to preserve. It's me when I had some hair. It's not that long ago, but shows how quickly it goes when you're a teacher. But this is at the Excel Centre. We also encourage you to go and talk to real people, which is a bit scary, but so and ask them about their experience of regeneration. How did the Olympics affect their experiences in a daily life? Have they benefited from the Olympics? And there are some interesting discussion points that I had. Now, this young man was a blind student who did A-level geography, and he did very well, he got an A, and that raised some challenges for us and opportunities, and we started using clay to teach some of the physical geography units, because you could mould clay into landscapes, and he could manipulate the clay with his hands. But he did really well, and it was good fun to do that. This is the Olympic Stadium, I think, in the year before the Olympics, so that photograph probably is 2011. And then this is the Olympic Park after the Olympic episode, so this is in its post-Olympic period. This is them converting the Olympic Stadium, I believe, into West Ham Football Club, as it is now in East End. And then the Stratford Station was a new infrastructural development, which was additional and clearly a benefit from the regeneration offered by the London. And then basically, I just wanted to show you, I've only posted the 3 years that were actually, last 3 years that were actually examined. Obviously 2020 because of COVID was not examined. So I just left you the results. And I mean, 2019 we were particularly pleased with. And we did very well relative to other schools, which my next slide will show you. But just to say that, kids are getting the range of grades, it suggests we must be teaching the curriculum reasonably well and reasonably securely to get pretty good grades. And then this is just from 2019, just to show you the blue line is our experience at school, and we did better than other schools and other similar schools in our delivery of data. So that might help you. And then just to end on, this optically was somebody who helped me with some of the fieldwork in London. He's an author and he writes geographical textbooks and still lectures, and he was the head of the Geographical Association, which is a professional body for people in geographical jobs and careers. And basically, the top quote: students who study geography-related degrees are the most employable graduates. There is evidence to support that. That's not going to be that, but I think if you think about the skills base that you have to be able to use statistics and maths. You have to be able to communicate through English. You've got to be happy to be active and do field work. The science links through biology and chemistry. You're sort of multi-talented, multiple facilities that you can use in geography. Anyway, I hope that's of use. If you need to come and find me and come and chat to me, you know where I am in the Geography History office, or email me in Clark@sortash.cloud.net. That'd be great. Hope that's been of use. Cheers. Bye.